TV. My name is Adabraka. Pardon me, I have catch a little cold, so my voice is somehow messy today. In today's lesson, we are going to look at the Gold Coast Youth League, which was one of the nationalist movement formed in the Gold Coast to fight for independence. Earlier in our discussions, we have talked about some of these nationalist movements. We have discussed the NCBWA, the British Congress of the National Congress of British West Africa. We have also talked about the Aborigines Rights Protection Society, and we saw that all these for nationalist movement were agitating for almost the same thing. Now, in case you missed out on those videos or lessons, I have all of those lessons on the channel. You can check in our playlist SHS3 or year 12 playlist. I believe you'll get all the lessons on the NCBWA as well as the Aborigines Rights Protection Society and the others. So today we are looking at the Gold Coast Youth League, which was also one of the nationalist movement formed before the Second World War, which then means that we can term the Gold Coast Youth League as a proto-nationalist movement, which means that these type of movements, as we have earlier learned, were not demanding for an end to colonial rule. They were not demanding for independence, so we shouldn't expect that in their demands to be demanding for independence. However, these proto-nationalist movement, which we have earlier indicated, were only asking the colonial masters to trim the rough edges, to make certain reforms, to introduce certain reforms and changes so that they, the educated elite, could be involved in the administration of their various colonies. And so the Gold Coast Youth Movement, the GCYL, was a proto-nationalist movement. And like I said, we have done a lot of videos on this, so if you do not understand or you miss any of that, you can check in the SHS3 playlist on the channel. So before we even dive into our discussion today, I would like to remind you to subscribe to our channel if you have not done so, and if you have also done so, we thank you very much for your support. You can share our link to your other colleagues who may be in need of these for vital information. Good, so let's then dive into our discussions for today. So let's go and check our lesson objectives for today. So the first of our lesson objectives for today is that by the end of this lesson, we should be able to state the objectives of the GCYL, and that is the Gold Coast Youth League. Okay. The next objective is for us to be able to identify the demands and achievement. Okay. Identify the demands and achievement of the Gold Coast Youth League. So what were the demands and achievement? Two things here: what they were demanding for, and was the organization or was the movement able to achieve what they were asking for? These two objectives should guide us in our discussions of the Gold Coast Youth League. So let's begin with our introduction. Now, when you look at the name Gold Coast Youth League, there is a word there, youth. Okay, there is a word there known as youth or young men. Now, these terms were used in the 1930s, and they simply meant educated commoners. So the term youth in those days, during the 1930s, when they talk about youth, they were referring to the educated commoners. The educated commoners were people who held no stool, okay, or any traditional office. So these people, they were not, royals. In those days, the prominent people in society were the royals. These educated commoners or these youth were not, of course, royals, but because or by virtue of their education, they rose to become very, very prominent in their, in their societies. An example of such people were lawyers, shopkeepers, petty traders, clerks, for cat-ease, school teachers, and so on and so forth. And this is where, even in our local dialect, especially among the Akan, they say krache. And anytime they say krache, they are referring to an educated person. Okay, so these people rose to the ranks, and they were almost just adored like being a chief, or of course coming from a royal family. So that is the World Gold Coast Youth League, which just suggests that this movement will be it would consist of only educated people. Gold Coast Youth League, which means educated people who were all involved. Yes, sure. So let's take a look at the clubs. Now, bear in mind that, you see, the Gold Coast Youth League, there is also a league. When we talk of league, clubs coming, playing a match together, a lot of clubs. That's what we mean by a league. So this movement, the GCYL, it consisted of several, clubs. These clubs were already in existence. Okay, they were already in existence. So some of these clubs, as we have seen, were the Asante Kotoko Society, which was obviously in Kumasi. We had the Ewe League, which was also in Ewe. And then we had the Enum Improvement Society, which was also in the eastern region. Then we had the Achimota discussion group, which was also in Achimota. Now, these ethnic and social clubs were formed for essential social education and for entertainment purposes. So these were clubs formed on ethnic lines that were into social, educational, and entertainment purposes. So they met occasionally, to talk about some of these things. So the Gold Coast Youth League consisted of already existing clubs that were in the Gold Coast. An example of such clubs is what we have talked about. Now, J.B Danquah, and if you mention J.B Danquah, he has family members in government today, and today you know why the president would always talk about him, and would even go to the extent of saying that we should name the University of Ghana after his uncle J.B Danquah. Now, this man J.B Danquah, he was a student in the US, all right, and he was the vice president of WASU. Okay, he was the vice president of WASU, and the WASU is West African Student Union. They are almost like Africans who had come together in London, in UK, who were schooling in UK, and they came together to form almost like an association. And J.B Danquah was the president of that association. Now, when he returned from the Gold Coast, from UK, so he was also in the UK. And when J.B Danquah returned to the Gold Coast from the UK, he requested that there should be a creation of a National Assembly of youth to study the problems facing the Gold Coast. So he realized that there should be some sort of National Assembly, like Parliament, which consisted of the youth. And the youth here means the educated people, all right, that will come together and talk about issues affecting the Gold Coast. And so, with the support of some of his colleagues in the UK, who were also in the WASU, example of such people were J.C. Graft-Johnson, we had K.A. Bosman, and then we also have R.S. Blake. So these people had also returned home from the UK, and so they supported him. And then the GCYL, the Gold Coast Youth League, which consisted of several clubs, was formed, and it was formed or founded in Accra on May 18, 1929. All right, so the existence of societies, clubs, and unions, they came together. So bear in mind that the Gold Coast Youth League was just the amalgamation of clubs, already existing clubs, into one, and then these clubs occasionally meet to discuss issues affecting the Gold Coast in those times. I hope you have learned something about the nature of the Gold Coast Youth League. Now let's take a look at the objectives of this Gold Coast Youth League. Now they had two principal objectives. Okay, the first one was that the GCYL was to bring the chiefs and the educated elite together. So one of the principal objectives, okay, of the Gold Coast Youth League was to bring together the chiefs and the educated elite. The educated elite were, of course, basically the youth or people who had education. Now, the Gold Coast Youth League believed that the salvation of the Gold Coast, okay, lied in the chiefs using the educated elite, as well as the educated elite using the chiefs. Now, if you have been following our discussions, you realize that there was this friction, this misunderstanding between the educated elite as well as the the chiefs. Now, these two people, educated elite and the chiefs, were fighting for representation of the people. Each of these groups felt that they were responsible, or they were supposed to represent the people. And don't forget that the British or the colonial masters were using these chiefs more than the educated elite. Okay, and so that made the people felt that the chiefs felt that they were the ones who were to represent the people. However, the educated elite on the other side also said that by virtue of their education, because most of these chiefs actually were not educated, so they didn't even understand some of the things that was going on. So the educated elite also felt that they were responsible for the people's representation, and this whole representation thing brought about issues between the chiefs as well as the educated elite. Okay, and so when J.B Danquah returned from the UK, he saw that there was the need to bring these two factions together so that they can spearhead independence. Don't forget that these two people using each other here comment that the people, some chiefs were not educated, so you can have an educated person to lead you in some of the things that you discuss with the British, because as I have earlier indicated, the British were using the educated the British was using the chiefs instead of the educated elite. Right? Good. So that was one of their objectives, and I think it was a good one, because these two factions could not be fighting each other, in a bit of representing the people. Now let's move on to the second objective. So the second aim of the Gold Coast Youth League, all right, was towards inculcate in the youth the importance of the development and progress of the country by bringing all together in a round table to discuss and exchange views on matters affecting the country. So that is what J.B Danquah also hoped for, that he brings together the youth, he inculcate that culture of the youth, meeting and coming together and discussing issues concerned with the country. Like today, a lot of people do in Ghana, discussing issues surrounding the country. So these were the two main objectives. When we say objectives, these were the two main principal objectives that the Gold Coast Youth League hoped to achieve by forming the Gold Coast Youth League. Now, the Gold Coast, the Youth League, they held their first conference at Achimota College, now Motown, Achimota School, and that is from 17th to 21st April in 1930. That was when they held their first conference, and the theme for the conference was the essentials in the progress and development of the country. And some of the key speakers at the event were Nana Ofori-Atta, and he's the one you find on your screen down here, Nana Ofori-Atta, Chief of Achimota. Then we had Casely-Hayford also here, as you can see him. Then we also had, of course, Kwabena Sechi also there. And don't forget that these people, Kwabena Sechi and Casely-Hayford, had been very instrumental in the formation of the Aborigines and the NCBWA. So all these people were all nationalists. They were in the same, line. All right, good. Now let's take a look at some of the demands of the NCBWA. Now, the Gold Coast Youth League. So what were some of the demands of the Gold Coast Youth League? What was the league asking for or requesting? Most of the demands of the Gold Coast Youth League were similar to the NCBWA. However, the Youth for Conference submitted a memorandum to the Secretary of State protesting against the minority recommendation of the Walter Elliott Commission that only one university college should be established for the whole of British West Africa. Now, when you look at the demands of the GCYL, the Gold Coast Youth League, it's not different from that of the NCBWA. And like I earlier indicated, we have the NCBWA, of course, video on the channel. Now, the NCBWA were asking for, they were demanding for certain things, like expel of the Syrians and the Lebanese traders, establishing of a university for West Africa, asking for Africanization in the civil service. So the NCBWA were requesting for so many things, and they were the same things that the Gold Coast Youth League were also asking for. However, the Gold Coast Youth League rejected. Now, the NCBWA, in one of their demands, they requested for a university to be established for West Africa. And so this Walter Elliott Commission came out with a recommendation that they were going to establish one university for the whole of British West Africa, so the 4 colonies in British West Africa. And the Gold Coast Youth League rejected that there is no way they were going to allow just one university to be established for the whole of British West Africa. Gambia, Ghana, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone were all going to have one university. J.B Danquah, who led the GCYL, the Gold Coast Youth League, wrote a memorandum, and they rejected that claim. They wanted a separate university for each of the colonies. So therefore, the GCYL demanded a separate university college for Ghana. So this is how J.B Danquah came into the scene with regards to the establishment of the university college for Ghana. Okay, and eventually, let's look at what happened if their demands were met. So they were demanding for a separate university. Let's take a look at the objectives of the achievement of the GCYL. Now, were they able to achieve some of the things that they had, of course, demanded for from the British? Now, the first obvious achievement of the Youth League, of the Youth Conference, was that it brought the chiefs and the educated elite together once more. So J.B Danquah and his people, they succeeded in bringing together the chiefs and the educated elite. And I believe that at this point, they had, a framework that these two people were going to work together, to bring about independence for the country. Let's take a look at the next one. Now, the GCYL also brought together Asante and the colony regions of Ghana, which were culminated in the legislative union in the two regions under the Barnes Constitution in 1946. Now, Asante, as we have earlier also indicated, Asante was not part of the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast was administered separately from Asante. Now, all the constitutions that were drafted in the Gold Coast, Asante was not part of that constitution. From the Gettysburg Constitution, the Clifford Constitution, Asante were not part of that constitution. Asante was, you know, was united with the Gold Coast when, in 1946, when the Banks Constitution did that, for the Banks Constitution did that. So Asante had always been administered separately for the Gold Coast, and the southern states. But through the activities of J.B Danquah and the GCYL, Asante was now made to be part of the Gold Coast, and there was a legislative union. Asante was given a seat in the Banks Constitution in the National Assembly. All right. Now let's take a look at the next one. Further, it awoken national consciousness to the need for economic, social, and constitutional reforms among the rising class of young school leavers, of course, civil servants, and petty traders. So they were able to raise national awareness that it is important that we come together, to fight for our economy, social reforms and some constitutional reforms, which were also needed in the Gold Coast. Now, the next one this is the most decisive achievement of the NCBWA. Now, they ended up, they were asking for a separate university for Ghana. And so that demand was achieved, and the University College of the Gold Coast, now University of Ghana, was established for only the Gold Coast in 1948. And this is why the president says that we should name the University of Ghana after his uncle, J.B Danquah, because it was his movement that spearheaded the establishment of that university for the Gold Coast. Good. So I believe you have had a nice discussions. These are past questions surrounding our topic. You can try your hands on some of them, and do not forget to share our link and subscribe to our channel. Have a nice day. Bye bye.